1840, 1860, 1880, 1900. Hey, let's pretend we're out of lockdown for a moment. Let me know in the comments where in the world you can fly to for $1,900 and take some epic photos. I'm Toby from Photorec.tv and I'm back with some thoughts on the Canon R5. And I've been shooting with the R5 and the R6 for over a month. I'm ready to share some thoughts with you and share why I was counting out 1900. This video is brought to you by Squarespace. I run Photorec.tv and my own personal portfolio on Squarespace. I love just how easy it was to set up, how easy it is to add content, and I know it's going to look beautiful on any device. Give Squarespace a try at squarespace.com/PhotorecTV to save 10% off your first purchase. The R5 and R6 release have made me really happy. You see, I teach workshops with McKay Photography Academy. We teach all over the world, workshops focused on landscape, wildlife, astro, sometimes a mix of all of that and more. On these workshops, I'm often asked about upgrading, and the conversation over the last couple of years has gone something like this. Hey Toby. Yeah? I'm a Canon photographer. I want to upgrade to one of these mirrorless I keep hearing about. Okay, well, are you on any of our trips coming up? I'm going to Africa with you next year. Okay, well, I don't love the autofocus capabilities of the R for real fast action right now, so wait for the next version, or if you're really itching to upgrade, consider switching systems. Sony a7Riii, it is a good all-around camera. Okay, I think I'll wait. Smart choice. And now that the R5 and R6 are here, I don't need to ask that question anymore. And to briefly broaden it, Nikon, Sony, Canon, they all have excellent all-around cameras capable of capturing just about everything most of us need. And they've got a broad enough lens selection that I don't feel like I have to add any buts to my recommendation. It just comes down to what's going to work best for you and how much you want to spend. A few weeks ago, I wrapped up my R6 review, and if you haven't watched that, you should, because much of what I say positively about the R6 extends to this R5. Really, my only complaint of the R6, major complaint, was it felt a little skimpy on megapixels. Now, comments were pretty split. Many of you saying, geez, man, 20 megapixels is just fine for almost all of us. And I do agree. But some of you were disappointed. You're shelling out bucks and you want to feel like you're upgrading, not side grading. You want to feel like you're getting a good value. And I feel like the R6 has enough benefits that even though it's a bit more expensive than other cameras in its class, and it has a little less megapixels, that it represents a good value. It is a great all-around camera. And I mentioned in that review that if you want more megapixels, here it is, the R5 with 45 megapixel. It represents a megapixel upgrade for just about every Canon user. Sorry, 5DSR guys. But is the R5 a good value? Well, first let's spend a few moments briefly outlining the differences between the R5 and the R6. Right off the top, the R5's got a bigger viewfinder and back screen. It's actually just higher resolution. Those are both nice over the R6, but honestly, using them and looking at them side by side, it's not a huge difference. It does negatively impact battery life. The R6 actually gets a little bit better battery life. And just a reminder that if you have the older LPE6 batteries, they won't charge in camera via USB. Photographers, I think you can make it through a day with either of these cameras and having just one spare on hand, and a combination of charging in camera or the use of that spare is going to get you through a day. Videographers, I'd have at least 2 spares on hand, though you can use USB power to give yourself almost infinite power with either camera. And you don't need to buy Canon's expensive USB power bank. Any PD charger works. This is my Dell laptop charger for a little Dell XPS. It works. Or this little Aki charger right here costs 30 bucks and can easily power and charge the newer batteries inside these cameras. So I highly recommend that. I'll put a link to it right down below. Port-wise, the R5 does have a flash sync port and a dedicated 3-pin remote port. You don't have the flash sync port on the R6, and it uses the single pin style for remote. The R6, of course, uses dual SD cards. The R5 uses a combo of the new CF Express and an SD card. That means that if you want to shoot better quality or the best quality video in this camera, and you want to have the best burst rates, and or write to 2 cards at once, which is kind of the whole point of having dual card slots, you'll need to buy a CF Express card. They range in price, but usually starting about $100. And speaking of burst rates, in the compressed RAW, which I've looked at compressed RAW versus regular RAW, I don't see any difference. Compressed RAW is good enough for me. The R6 you can shoot almost endlessly at 20 frames per second. I didn't hit a single buffer pause until I was close to 500 pics, and that buffer pause was incredibly brief, and I wasn't even shooting on the fastest SD cards you can get. Now the R5 is about half of that, and of course it does take a little bit longer to clear the buffer. So definitely not as well suited for fast action, and we'll come back to that in a minute. Video side of things, I mean, this is where we see a huge difference. 8K video, internal RAW, fantastic, but with all of those overheating problems. 4K, 60 frames per second, no internal RAW on the R6. Now, the latest firmware update, there was some overheating problems, but the latest firmware update has greatly extended the length of time that you can shoot at the highest quality without worrying about overheating. The R5 has gotten a little bit better with firmware updates, but still, if you were planning on shooting your kid's 45-minute play in 8K with this camera, you're going to be disappointed. That said, if you know what you're doing and you've got some flexibility in how you shoot and when you shoot and the length of breaks you can take, this camera is capable of creating epically gorgeous video. And both cameras, the video is just so easy to work with. The autofocus system, it's easy for anybody to be behind the camera, even if they don't know what they're doing. Just tap on your face and you're good to go. And I like that the app is easy to set up for solo video, and they included a self-timer for starting video. Now, one difference I find a little bit odd, the R6 is limited to shooting in full manual or full automatic mode, no AV or TV mode. And if you're shooting stills in the R6 and you start video with a press of the video record button, you're going to automatically switch to the fully automatic settings of recording. On the R5, you have all of the modes available to you in video, and when you press record in stills mode, it's going to pick up the settings that you have saved in mode 3. Just a little something to be aware of. Definitely a software limitation that videographers that want more control, they want you to upgrade to the R5. Weather sealing wise, the R5 is supposed to be better weather sealed. It also has a more body construction. Honestly, they both feel really, really similar in hand. Control wise, they didn't skimp, and I really love this. Thank you, Canon. Both of these cameras have nearly identical control schemes, and it is just absolutely fantastic. The ergonomics and usability of these cameras is excellent. You've got that fully articulating touchscreen. You can also use it as an AF point selection when it's up to your face. You also have the AF point joystick. You have multiple control wheels. Again, these cameras really are an absolute joy to use in the field. And those of you that have some vision issues, you can increase the size of the display on the back. It's kind of a nice feature. But let's finish this differences looking at the price. $2,500 for the R6, $3,900 for the R5. That's a $1,400 difference. So to summarize, paying $1,400 more gets you more megapixels, better build quality, better weather sealing, and of course, better video, but that does come with some limitations. It comes down to your budget and your needs, but I want to come back to the idea of a good value in that $1,900 that I was counting out at the beginning of this video. But before we finish that discussion, I want to talk about the value of Squarespace. I used to run Photorec.tv on a more traditional platform. The software I used was free, but I had the cost of server space, the theme costs, the plugins costs, the ones that I needed to give me some of the functionality that I needed, and more importantly, the security and peace of mind that I wasn't getting hacked again. Those costs all started to add up, include the cost of my newsletter software, and I realized that switching to Squarespace's all-in-one platform would not only greatly simplify things, but it would save me thousands of dollars a year. Seriously, Squarespace makes it so easy to build a beautiful online presence with high-quality starting templates that are easy to customize, and if you do get stuck, they provide 24/7 customer support. And yes, they're going to easily handle the domain name for you too. It truly has never been easier to create a beautiful website. Try it out today. They offer a completely free 14-day trial, no credit card required. And if you start at squarespace.com/photorectv, you can save 10% off your first purchase. So let's come back to determining the value of the R5. On the road trip that I took it along, I had my Sony a7Riii along with me. And just to remind you, this was released in October of 2017. It's a 42 megapixel camera using a backlit sensor, dual SD card slots capable of 11 frames per second. Video-wise, 4K at 30 frames per second. It does have animal and human eye detect autofocus, and it currently is selling for $2,300. Now, I occasionally shot some side-by-side photos on that road trip and noticed that they looked pretty similar. So when I returned to Seattle, I shot some more, and I really struggled to see a noticeable difference in sharpness between these two cameras. And ISO performance and dynamic range was similar. The Sony is slightly better in dynamic range. I think the Canon might be a little bit better in controlling noise, although it really just looks a little different to me. I think it might come down to your preference. You can download the full RAWs of what I've just been showing you here and linked down below. But here's the thing. If I'm paying this much for a camera, I would want to see a pretty noticeable difference versus a camera from 3 years ago that is now significantly cheaper. Wouldn't you? And then I was curious. I mentioned the cost of lenses in my R6 review. They should be considered. RF lenses, they're all really good. Some are exceptional in their optical performance, but you are paying for that. So I was curious. I had been using the exact same lens back and forth to remove that from the equation, but how does it look if I set up this as a Sony a7R III with the Tamron 28-70? This is a $3,100 combination right now. And compare those photos against the R5 with the 24-105 f4. That's a $5,000 combination right now. That's a difference in price of $1,900. And at f4, I really fail to see a meaningful difference. And again, I think Canon has created two really excellent cameras. And if you're in the Canon ecosystem already, I can happily recommend the R6 and the R5. Just know that with the R5, you are definitely paying a chunk of money for the comfort, ergonomics, and usability of this Canon versus other cameras currently on the market. And that's totally legit. That's a valid reason for buying a more expensive camera. I want to share a couple more things really quickly. I mentioned this in the R6 review, but I want to mention it here again. I'm really impressed with the autofocus in these cameras. It is great with good visual feedback on where your focus point is. I like that these models have focus stacking built in. It's an easy and nice feature to use. The Wi-Fi app, it's decent, and I enjoy the bulb mode that has a timer built into the app. That's good. Both cameras offer good customizability. You can customize many of these buttons. I wish there was one or two more that you could customize. And the fact that I can customize the light button, but not the lock button next to it, that seems a little silly. I love how well adapted lenses work. I talked about this in more detail in the R6 review, but if you've got modern Canon lenses or modern third-party lenses, you really shouldn't have any worry at all. They're going to work well. I love the fact that you've got 20 frames per second silently, and only a little worry in this camera about rolling shutter. I maybe saw it, maybe. R6, no worry at all. I think this camera is fantastic to shoot 20 frames per second silently of just about all of the fast action. You might see it here in a little bit of warping of some faster moving extremities or the ball as it's being thrown. So just something to keep in mind. But if you are shooting 20 frames per second with the R5, as I mentioned earlier in this review, you are going to find yourself hitting that buffer limit a little bit more often. Or when you're reviewing these photos later, you're probably going to be cursing at yourself for having so many 45 megapixel shots to go through. One annoyance about the silent shutter, though, is it doesn't work for exposures longer than half second. You're blocked from going longer. Nighttime time lapses. I'd love to be able to use that silent shutter for a couple of thousands of frames that are seconds to 10 to 30 seconds long. And then again, I'm going to come back to those expensive lenses. I mentioned this already, but not only are they expensive, for the most part, they're larger and heavier. So if going lighter was a reason you were buying into a mirrorless system right now, your options with Canon are pretty limited. though their roadmap does have more f4 lenses on it, so I'm hopeful we're going to see more travel-friendly system soon. Plus, I expect we'll start to see more third-party lenses for the R5, but right now, it is not the lightest, most compact mirrorless system on the market. It is, however, so responsive. I love this. Coming from Sony, I feel like I'm always waiting after I shoot a burst of pictures to change drive mode or to review and magnify the playback image. There's always this lag. You do get locked out of a few functions when Canon is writing to the card, but there are easy workarounds, and reviewing photos is so responsive, as is magnifying and moving around the photo. Again, this camera is a joy to use. All right, I think we can basically wrap it up there and repeat that line. This camera is a joy to use, and it provides very good image quality. But is it a good value? It depends. And when you add up the cost of the camera, an adapter if you plan to use existing lenses, and you're going to put a CF Express card in here, you are looking at a cost that is significantly more expensive than anything else in its class right now. But when I was out in the field shooting with it, I wasn't really worried about whether it was the best value out there. I was enjoying shooting with a thoughtfully designed camera that is fun to use. So drop your thoughts in the comments. How do you feel about the price of this camera? And what's your $1,900 ticket destination? Hit that thumbs up button if you found this useful, and don't forget to subscribe along with pressing that little bell to be notified of future videos. Thanks so much for watching. Bye-bye.